Hello, 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 and welcome back. This is the episode number 6 of my Zen and the Art of Guitar Maintenance tutorials. Let's change strings to this vintage Fender Telecaster. Now, you may already have seen a video where I restring a Strat, so you might ask why you should watch this one. Isn't it the same procedure every time? Well, most of it is the same, but in fact this one is an improved edition. In my earlier restringing videos, I have forgotten, my apologies, to address one important detail that you should know about. So this video reveals you something the others didn't. Let's do it. So we'll loosen the strings first from the tuners, just enough to take off the tension from the neck. And then I'll snap off the strings like so. And as always, pay attention, be careful to not make marks to the headstock when removing the strings. The same with the bridge. Here we can pull them out all at once. A bit of cleanup. This is a nitro finished guitar. So normal guitar polish compounds like the Guitar Nomad, Guitar Detailer, that would work fine, or others similar to that. But not any hotter solvents for the nitro. The fretboard is in good condition. We just clean it up a bit. And with the headstock, pay extra care with the old nitro, where especially these old Fenders, the logo is applied on top of the lacquer in such way that it really easily comes off. As you can see, there's already bits and pieces missing there, so you wouldn't want to wipe that or rub it, or especially not put any polish compounds to it, because you might ruin the logo. So I don't want to do any further damage to it that it already has happened in the past. So here I'm demonstrating, in case your strings don't have color coding and they just come in a single package. This is an easy way to tell the high E string and the B string apart, because otherwise sometimes I've seen that people are accidentally stringing the guitars the wrong way around. Notice this when guitars come to repair, that the E string is put to the B and B is in the E, obviously it doesn't work very well that way. An easy way to tell those strings apart with trying them like so. So when pulling the strings through, be careful to not hit the lacquer with that swinging ball end. So take it slow enough so that it comes through nice and clean. There we go. Checking the nut slot. They feel pretty good, but I'm adding a bit of Big Bend's lubrication. So the tool, that little tip that comes with the tool, with the Big Bend's nut sauce, and so I'm applying a tiny little bit to the nut slots, not too much, just, and then I'll continue rubbing the string to it like so. Pay attention, pull the string straight, and then 1, 2, that much extra. But we're going to do it a little bit different now this time. A step that I have kind of overlooked and not explained before. So I'm doing a tight bend to the string before trimming it to length, like so. This is not something I normally would do, but I'm going to explain to you now why I'm doing it. So first the bend and then trimming behind the bend, like so. So this is a step, an extra additional step that you don't really need to do with modern hex core strings, but with round core strings. There are many brands available still with the kind of vintage style round core strings. They would require this extra step to be done. Otherwise, you might end up ruining the string by trimming it first, and then the winding might come off the round core wire of the string. So there, I already added the lubricant, so now I'm just gonna rubbing it there. Now for the A string, a little bit more extra. So round core strings, you would do that extra bend. We have hex core strings in this guitar, so we'll skip that step. We'll just move on. So with modern hex core strings, like the majority of strings would be, you really don't need to do that bending. It's an old myth and has to do with old vintage round core strings. So here I'm releasing the twist. It's a step that is often overlooked. Something that I always do. It does improve the intonation when there is no sideways twist in the strings. Okay, D string. We're gonna leave even more extra. I can see, yeah, that much extra for the D string. And for the round core string, you would do again the bend before trimming it. A step that we are now skipping. And there we continue winding the string nicely around the post. So you can see I'm leaving more and more extra the lighter the gauge of the string, and soon enough you will find out why if you don't already know. And there I release the twist again and continue winding it all the way. And the G string, I noticed there's some dirt in the as you can see, it comes off nicely with the end of the string. I'm just pushing it out. There's still that lubrication in the nut slot. It's kind of greasy stuff, so it will stay there, even though, so I don't need to add more. I'm just gonna rub it like so, and it feels nice and slippery, the nut slot. So here I pulled back the string so I can kind of count easier the excess amount. 1, 2, 3, 4. So even more extra to the G string. The G string would be the most critical one. The most critical string regarding the excess to leave, especially in this type of Fender style headstock with 6-in-line tuners. Wind it nice and tight. Normally the way I release the twist of the string, I wouldn't turn the body and look at it if there's twist. I just kind of, you know, push it out a bit, so that if there is twist in the string, it kind of comes loose and the string is relaxed, so to speak, when I start winding it the last rounds. Cleaning the nut slot a bit. One, two, three, four. So I'm leaving the same amount as for the G string. The B and the E strings are not as critical as the G string, and the lower strings would be thanks to the string tree we have in the headstock in this guitar. And now I'm doing a little bit differently here, showing you a technique. See carefully. So I'm pushing the string to the split post like that and creating a knot. It is because I do this for the B and E string. This is, I mean, there's other ways you can do this, but the reason for it is that these light gauge strings might sometimes, depending if the posts are worn down or so on, it might be that the B and the E strings kind of slip out from that splitted post. So that's why I'm locking them like that, just to be sure. And so there's the string tree, which means that I don't need to be so critical about the amounts of turns around the post, because the string tree will hold the string down at a proper angle. In this guitar, the string tree is kind of even unnecessarily low, creating kind of a, I would say, too much of an angle from the nut to the string tree. But if we would do a maintenance job here, I might want to raise it a bit higher with a little collar that I would put under the string tree, but right now we're not doing that. So there's the lock again around the post. Very simple little trick that will eliminate the possibility of the slippage of the high E string from the splitted post. And there's the releasing the twist. And place the string under the string tree. This is also something I see from time to time, that, you know, people wonder why is the high E string resonating badly as an open note, and then when the guitar is brought in, the string is not properly placed under the string tree. So that's something that you just pay attention. Okay, at the bridge, let's look at this, because these vintage style Telecaster bridge, I mean, the string spacing can be off because there isn't really any dedicated slots for, you know, how to mount the strings here, other than you just need to see that the string spacing is correct. So we notice here that the B spacing between the G and the B strings is huge, and between the B and E strings there's very little spacing, so obviously the B string is off. So we're gonna move that, and we're gonna see where is the correct place to put it. Now that would look right. I'll just kind of test it. Where is it? Is it that, or yeah? So when I place it like that, it appears to be right. So I tighten it up again, and we have a nicer string spacing at the bridge. Now we can see the angles. This is why we left that excess amount of string, and different amounts to each string. So as you can see, 2 rounds, 3 rounds, 4 rounds, maybe 5 to 6 rounds for the G string, so that we get the correct angle from the nut to the tuner, so the open notes will ring clean. Because if we don't have that angle there, if there's not enough pressure at the nut from the string, the open notes won't ring nicely. So we move on to tuning up the guitar. Just getting it to the neighborhood first, and then I'll do a bit of pre-stretching the strings. If you're uncertain how much you should do this, better not to do it at all, because doing it too much will ruin your strings. This is a technique that guitar techs, when touring with bands, they would kind of have to do to some extent to make the tuning set quicker. You know, when they have to change strings for the artist in the middle of a set, you know, he brings the guitar, breaks a string, or you know, wants a fresh set of strings, and Yeah, so you need to kind of change new strings and make it keep the tuning quick. So you'd have to do, but if you don't do it, it's fine as well, because the tuning will set after, you know, the guitar is kind of just hanging on the wall for a while and playing for half an hour or so, bending the strings a bit. The tuning will set. But so now I'm going to demonstrate to you what happens if you overstretch the strings. You can overstretch them just with your hands, with your fingers, but it would even easier. It would happen with this kind of tools. This is called string stretcher. It's made for this particular purpose, to pre-stretch the strings. So what I'm doing here is that I'm kind of now deliberately doing it too much, and you'll see what happens to the A string when I take it out. Okay, there you can see, and what has happened here is that the winding of the string has come off the core wire, and that's why it's so absolutely twisted and ruined. And this happens even to the modern hex core strings, but for vintage style round core strings that we talked about earlier, this happens really easily. And it happens to the extent where the winding of the string really literally comes off the core wire, and it will kind of make a really funny sound when it's there, kind of rattling around the core wire when the tension of the winding comes off. So people, pay attention, don't overstretch your strings. That's what happens when you overstretch your strings. So just quickly replace that A string with a new GHS Boomer A string. There we go. Tuning again. That's it. All right, there we have it. A quick recap of the essential points. Number 1, guitar strings wear down relatively fast, but you can prolong the string life by keeping your hands clean and your instrument clean. So wash your hands before playing, wipe the strings from over and under with a rug after playing. Goes a long way. Number 2, so how do you know when it's time to change new strings to your guitar? I'd say better to be proactive and not to wait till the last moment. This way you avoid breaking strings in the worst possible time, middle of rehearsals, on a gig, or recording a video. So how can you tell when it's time? Well, the first thing you may notice that the sound of your guitar gets darker the older the strings are. Sometimes this doesn't happen though, especially if you're using coated strings such as Elixir NanoWeb or others. With coated strings, the sound remains bright and fresh a lot longer. But even Elixirs and other coated strings, they do wear down, and there's an easy way to tell this. So slide your fingers under the strings. Does the underside of the strings feel smooth, or do you detect heavily worn spots at the fret locations? Well, if you do, they won't play perfectly in tune anymore. And the longer you continue playing, the worse your guitar will sound. So if you notice that your guitar intonation is off, that's an indication that you should have changed the new strings already last week. Number 3, trimming the strings. In Fender style guitars, it is important to understand that the length of the excess string matters. The amount of string you wind around the tuner posts, it defines the angle from the nut to tuners. Especially pay attention to those D and G strings. Number 4, hex core versus round core strings. Not going to talk about the pros and cons of each string type. That's another video waiting to be made later. On this video, I simply address the fact that trimming the length of round core strings requires one extra step to make sure the tension between the core and the winding around the core will be maintained after trimming. This is particularly important for the very commonly seen guitars with vintage Fender style slotted post tuners, such as this Telecaster here. The same goes for a lot of Strats, Fender basses, and lots of other brands too. So in conclusion, if you're using vintage round core strings and have tuners with slotted posts that require trimming before fitting the strings, first bend, then trim. First bend, then trim. Okay? Hex core strings are today more or less the norm, and they don't require this trick, but it is good to know where this myth of bending the string before cutting it to length comes from. So if you already didn't know, now you do. Extra special thanks to Damien from Switzerland to pointing out this missing detail from my earlier videos. I've used modern hex core strings on all my earlier videos and this one too, so there's essentially no need for the bend before trimming, but it's not an excuse to leave it out from the videos and cause you guys confusion. So number 5, releasing the twist of the strings. Yes, a step often overlooked, but important one, as it does have a clear effect on the intonation stability of the guitar. So a little extra effort, but definitely worth it. Number 6, pre-stretching the strings. Be very careful to not overstretch. Better not pre-stretch at all than stretch too much, as you saw from the video. And especially if you're using those vintage style round core strings we talked about, skip this step altogether. Not a good idea to pre-stretch round core strings, as the winding comes off the core wire really easily, destroying the strings completely. Number 7, don't rush with it. Take your time, breathe in, breathe out. The best result comes from focusing to what you're doing, paying attention to each step one at a time, I've explained on this video. Alright guys, that's about it. I hope I didn't forget anything. Please leave your comments down below, and if you found the video useful, hit that like button. If you know someone who you feel should see this video, share it with that person. If you don't want to miss the next one, subscribe and hit that bell icon for notifications. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one. Be safe, take care, peace, love, and good music.